suspension just flops over, but it sticks, it holds. Hey guys, and welcome to the first video of this channel. This is, of course, a 2008 Mazda MX-5 Miata GT. It's also got the suspension package, so that gives you the Bilstein dampers and the limited slip differential. So if I was going to buy an NC, that is pretty much exactly how I would have it spec'd. The car right now has just over 60,000 kilometers on it, and I've only put just over 1,000 kilometers on it since I bought it a few months ago. So I've had it for a while, but with it being winter, I haven't actually had that much seat time in this car. But we'll talk about what it was like to drive it in the winter, and then we'll go for a drive. Yeah, otherwise, in case anyone's wondering why I'm showing up on their subscription feeds, I used to put some gaming videos on this channel about 10-15 years ago, back when I was in high school. Those are all gone at this point, all deleted. From this point on, I'm pretty much making these videos just to have some practice using the GoPro, so I can eventually use it, you know, for me and my girlfriend's travel videos. And I thought, what better way to practice using the GoPro and using the editing software than to film some videos with the Miata and a couple of my other cars and whatever else I can get my hands on. So with that out of the way, basically I bought this car to replace my 2013 Volkswagen Golf R. We'll kind of talk about why I ended up making that switch later when we get into the drive. But for now, let's have a quick look on the outside, come back and do a quick overview of the interior, and then we'll go for a drive and talk about how this car drives, how it handles, and what it's like to live with. Yeah guys, so this, being a 2008, is obviously a third generation NC Miata. I've always wanted a 94 to 97, one of the later NA first gen cars, but they're just getting really hard to find, especially up here in Canada. No one seems to be selling them, and the ones that are still in good shape, people aren't getting rid of them. We are riding on some winter tires here. The rims have seen better days, but I ended up picking up these tires the morning before I picked the car up. So we do have some Goodyear Winter Command Ultra winter tires. These are 205/55 16s, which for the 16-inch size is actually one size up of what the matching stock size would be. That just gives me an extra about ½ inch of ground clearance over what would have been the 205/50 R16s. At home, on the summer tires, we've got a set of 205/45 17s on some Continental Extreme contacts. Have a quick look at the trunk here. Trunk space in the Miata, obviously pretty small, although you could fit a few backpacks in here, definitely a bunch of grocery bags. Trip to the supermarket would be fine, though I wouldn't be taking this to Costco. With those oversized winter tires, I do kind of like the stance it gives off here. Nothing's modified with the suspension, but the slightly larger tires, they just kind of poke out a little bit, give it a nice little look there. Also at the back though, probably my least favorite design part of this car, these taillights that Mazda designed back in the early 2000s. Very fast and furious. Probably gonna get some red overlays here to kind of cover everything up, but leave the reverse light open there, just to give it a cleaner, more modern look. For the non-car people, it might sound a little crazy, but this third gen Miata often gets made fun of for being too big. It is the biggest of the three Miatas. A lot of people don't like the NCs because of that. I've never really felt that way. It is big, it is heavier than the other three generations, but at 2,500 pounds, that is still super light by modern standards, especially having front and side airbags, which was important to me. Here in Canada, actually, only the GT trims on the earlier NCs, on the NC1 models, came with the side airbags. And I thought, if I'm already going with the biggest, heaviest Miata, I might as well get the one with the side airbags. Quick look under the hood here. This car is completely unmodified, just over 60,000 kilometers, like I said. With these NCs, you get the 2-liter Mazda MZR engine, 167 horsepower, 140 pound-feet of torque. Not a ton of power, but at only 2,600 pounds, it moves the car okay. Again, it's not fast, but it's enough power to get out of its own way, especially with that low weight. Probably no plans to modify anything under the hood, except we'll probably replace the coolant reservoir here. These are known to fail on these cars. I figure we'll replace it before things really go wrong. Quick look at the interior here. We got some very simple, basic, but easy to read gauges. All the switchgear, all very simple. This is very early to mid 2000 stuff here. Nothing too exciting. You do get the Bose sound system in the GT trim. I can't say it's that great compared to modern sound systems, but I'm sure it's better than the base system. These older cars, the early NCs, no aux ports, no Bluetooth, so got my handy Bluetooth adapter there. We do have one level heated seats, which get really hot. Wish there was a low setting on there, but there isn't. On the left side, I do appreciate when manual transmission cars have a cup holder on the left, because if you're at a stoplight taking a sip of your drink, you still have your right hand free to shift into gear if the light changes. These cup holders on the side here are quite small though, so can't be buying any large drinks, to stick to the smalls and the mediums. In terms of space and seating position, you know what, the legroom in here, even though it's such a tiny car, is fine. I'm 5'8" and there's still a few clicks to go back, so I think if you're under 6 feet tall, there is enough legroom here. Where you do feel where this car is small is in the width. You can feel that this car is quite narrow. I usually like to rest my elbow on the upper door sills kind of while I'm driving, but this door sill is just so close due to how narrow the car is that it is kind of awkward to do that. Besides the rest of the interior, we've got the 6-speed manual here, of course. Nice short throws there. Manual handbrake here, which is nice. A lot of new cars are going away from this. But in a sports car, you want that manual handbrake. Window controls in the middle. Got some tiny cup holders here that you can cover up there. Putting cups here puts the cups right in the way of trying to shift. So it is nice, like I said, we get that cup holder on the left. We do have a decent sized glove box there, which is nice. A lot of 2-seat sports cars don't have a glove box at all. That is lockable. Also got this center storage here. This is where your fuel release is, and some room at the back there to put things. Of course, being a Miata, got the sun visors that don't go over to the side, and of course it's a convertible. Starting with the 3rd generation NC Miatas, they made this roof mechanism super easy. Really, you just release this and you throw it back, and you're ready to be top down. To put it back up, just unlatch. There's a couple little spots for your hand to grab. Just pull it up and latch it back in, and that's it. There is a power retractable hardtop available for this car, but I've always loved the soft top just for how easy it is to put that up and down. Go over to the passenger side and have a quick look there. Probably the only blemish on this interior are these seats. There's just some wear here from getting in and out. We'll have to touch that up when it warms up. And a little bit of similar wear on the steering wheel here. That one won't be as easy to touch up, but that's okay. over to the passenger side. This seat is in perfect condition. Ignore the seat bottom cover there. That's just a little seat cover from Amazon in case I have to take my dog with me. They do give you a storage net down there. And behind both front seats, you'll also get this nice storage bin behind that you can hide stuff away back there. Getting into the passenger side. The passenger side actually is a little bit narrower feeling even than the driver's side. That transmission tunnel down there definitely eats into your leg space over here. Again, the legroom forward is fine. You just feel it is a little narrow. But hopefully your passenger enjoys some top-down cruising. And on the side here, same door panels. Got some nice leather over here. The dashboard materials here are all kind of this hard, cheap plastics here. Usually, interior is kind of second priority for me right after driving dynamics. But in a car like this, where the top's going to be down a bunch of the time, everything's going to be exposed to the elements, I kind of don't mind that we have these cheap, hard plastics. It'll just be easier to wipe them down if they get any, sap or dirt or dust on them. Well, yeah. Other than that, let's go for a drive. It's the Mazda key here. Mazdas of this era with the smart entry had this weird flat key here. The idea was, I guess, it's supposed to be kind of like a credit card. You can put it in your wallet. That way it's always with you when you take your wallet out with you. But for me, in my idea anyway, you're always taking your house keys with you anyway. So why bother putting your keys inside your wallet? I don't know. That's just me. Maybe there's something else to it. But to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It is kind of cool that it is a unique key, though. Starting up the car, it is not a push-button start. You actually have this kind of fake key tab here that you twist and turn just like a normal key. In a sports car, I actually kind of like that. You kind of get that mechanical feeling of turning the car on instead of just pushing a button and the car does its thing. Anyway, that's kind of a small thing. Maybe that's just me too. Hey guys, so today is actually a completely different day. We had some technical difficulties, technical issues with the past driving footage. So we're gonna redo it today, almost about a week later. I'm wearing the same outfit for video continuity, but yeah, we'll just be talking about the drive today. I'm redoing this about a week later. So if I end up repeating anything I repeated last time, I apologize. The one good thing about today is that we got a little bit of snow overnight, so we can now actually talk about what this is like to drive in some winter conditions. Not a lot of snow, just a light dusting, but there is some ice out here today. So with that, let's get underway while we're in this random residential area here. Start going and talk about what this car was like to drive in the winter. As you can see, traction control going off there. Like I said, not a lot of snow, but quite a bit of ice today, so we'll have to be a little careful. Yeah, if there's just snow on the ground, even if there's a couple inches of it, not too big of a deal. It's kind of in the ice where this has some trouble putting the power down. On top of that, you can see traction control is quite intrusive, intervenes pretty early. But it is nice that there is a physical button that you can turn that off. I do wish that there was a way to turn off traction and stability control off separately, because in a lot of winter driving situations, there are times where you may want to have the traction off but still have the stability there to be able to save you if you get into a little bit of trouble. Just puttering along here though. Once you gotta have a little bit of patience with the ice and hope that people around you have a little bit of patience as well. But once you get going, it is totally fine. some slick surfaces on the ground here. Okay. Coming away from the stop sign there, quite slippery, wheels spinning. But turn the traction control off and modulate the throttle. Actually not so bad. Obviously, in terms of drivetrains, rear-wheel drive isn't exactly the best in the winter. You could argue that it's the worst. But with some patience and some skill and just getting used to it, most importantly, having those winter tires, not so bad. Always want winter tires on any car you drive in the winter, but on rear-wheel drive especially. Because then you have the grip in the corners and in the turns, and you can have a little bit of fun sliding it around like we did back there. It's a school zone, so we can't go very fast. But sliding this car around when there's no other cars around all winter has been pretty fun. While we're at a stop here, this might sound crazy, but there are actually a couple pros to driving a Miata in the winter. Mostly just due to having a cabin this small. Basically, once the engine starts warming up and you start getting heat through your heater, it doesn't take long to heat up this super small, tight cabin. The other thing is, if you get up in the morning and there's frost that you got to scrape off the windows here aren't that big and there's not as many of them, so you get done scraping that ice off pretty quickly. Really slippery there. But again, just need to modulate the throttle, have a little bit of patience, and you can get through it no problem. And it's actually kind of fun. It's in the ice like this today where we have to be a little careful. With how sharp the throttle response is in this car, it's quite easy to accidentally overspin those tires coming out of a stop. And we have hit a dead end. Let's turn around. Another thing just about daily driving this car, that might sound weird to you if you've never driven a convertible, but backing this car up isn't as easy as you would think it would be. That rear window is quite small, and of course you have no kind of rear side windows to look at, so every diagonal view out the back is kind of hard to see. If there could be someone standing right there and I would have no idea, so you just gotta take it slow, be careful. These little side helper mirrors I put on really help for those blind spots. Changing lanes isn't as easy as you think as well because of those blind spots, so those mirrors help out quite a lot. Seeing your blind spot on the right side there isn't so bad because you can kind of see out the side and out the back at the same time. But on this left side here, just have this huge blind spot here that's hard to see. You gotta kind of lean forward to look. Fun to slide this around for sure. Certainly more of a challenge driving through the winter than the Golf R I just got rid of was with the all-wheel drive, but that's actually kind of what I wanted. This might sound a little weird, but I've always been the kind of person who for some reason enjoys more difficult, more engaging type drives where you have to be a little more focused. Driving through the snow in the winter is actually kind of the most fun for me. And I just started to find that, the Golf R with the all-wheel drive, it just started feeling kind of too easy. I'm finding that I prefer two-wheel drive cars, rear-wheel drive of course, but even front-wheel drive. Even when the roads are nice, for whatever reason, I seem to prefer them just because you have to work with the car a little bit to get the power down. It's a bit more of a game you have to play while driving. As all-wheel drive, you can kind of just mash the pedal down and the car will send power front to back as needed and kind of just does its thing. And eventually, to me, that just kind of got boring. Speaking of the Golf R, talk a little bit about how I ended up with this while we're puttering along here. How I ended up with this, what other cars I considered. The other reason I was getting a little bored of the Golf R, sounds kind of weird to say, but the Golf R was great when I was living at my parents' house. I needed something practical when that was my only vehicle. But ever since I moved out, I moved in with my girlfriend. She has a 2017 Mazda CX-5, and in a lot of ways, at least around town, the Golf R and the CX-5 kind of started feeling a little too similar to me. Obviously, if you put the two of those cars on a racetrack, the Golf R would run circles around the CX-5. But around town, they're very similar cars with similar missions, you could say. They're both four-door hatchbacks. Obviously, one is a crossover. But just generally speaking, they both have four doors and a hatch. They both have interiors that kind of punch above their price point. They're both very refined. They both have great inputs. Both handle well. Both just have that nice blend of, kind of half blend of sport and comfort. And eventually, around town at least, they kind of started to feel the same. And it just started to feel like we owned two very similar cars. And personally, that's just something that I didn't quite like. I like a little bit of variety. And so what's more different than a practical all-wheel drive hatchback than a two-seat convertible? Getting into some corners here, we'll have to be careful again with that ice, but typical Miata fashion, car just flops over a little bit, but then it sticks, holds the speed really well, and we get through the corner just great. Yeah, there's a reason why Mazda Miatas are so popular. Believe it or not, if you're not into cars, this might also sound crazy, but there is a reason why they are the most popular race car platform. Just that lightweight, great steering feel, well balanced in the corners, 50-50 weight distribution front and back. Just has all of the right components to be a great little entry-level sports car. In terms of other cars I considered buying, one thing the Golf R did teach me about myself that I kind of already knew, but I guess confirmed, I tend to prefer lightweight chassis, lightweight cars over cars that have tons of horsepower and are a little bit heavier. I just find that when you're stuck behind traffic, cars that are light just feel a little more playful. When they're not as fast, you can really beat on them and push them hard, roll through the gears, get through the higher RPMs, and not be getting yourself into trouble, still be within the speed limit. And yeah, when a lighter weight car just feels more tossable when you're having to stick to these city speeds. It's not rush hour right now, but when there is lots of traffic and you're stuck behind people, it's a lot more fun being in a car that feels fun when it's slow, rather than a car that feels like it's just being held back by traffic because you want to go fast, but you can't. Obviously, that's totally personal preference. A lot of people will feel differently. A lot of people like speed. I'm not saying that I don't like cars with high horsepower, but for my own personal car that I'm going to drive every day, that just seems to be what I prefer. It got to the point where I actually enjoyed driving my old 2000 Honda Civic SIR, the equivalent of the Civic Si if you're in America. Started having more fun driving that than my Golf R, and I realize it's because I got to just beat on it, and it's lighter. It's got more tactile inputs. It's a little more raw feeling. The Golf R was a great daily driver, but again, it's kind of replaced in its duty by the CX-5, which could do everything it could from a daily driver perspective. So other cars I did consider, you know, Scion FRS, Subaru BRZ, Toyota 86. But I had previously rented an FRS and an NC Miata on previous vacations I've done. And at that point, I already knew I liked the Miata better. The BRZ just has this dead spot in the torque curve that everyone knows about by now. Kind of 3.5 to 5,000 RPM. The torque just totally falls off. That's kind of the RPM range where you do all your spirited driving around town, so it kills all the fun at all the wrong times. The Miata doesn't have as peaky or as exciting of a power band up top, but around town, the torque curve is just much more preferable, much more linear. And for that reason, to me, it just felt like the car that was much more fun to drive around town. Plus, you can't beat being able to take the roof off. I have taken the roof off a couple of times in the last couple weeks, even though it's slightly below freezing out. If you have the windows up and the heater on, it's actually still quite warm in the cabin. I knew I wanted something lightweight, aside from the Miata and the FRS 86 chassis. Not really any other choices out there that are still quite modern. And finding this car with this low mileage just ended up being perfect. Now that we're done talking about all that, focus more in on this car. Again, we got to be a little careful with all the ice out here. Leave stability control on. But yeah, the suspension flops over even though we got the Bilstein dampers. Suspension just flops over, but it sticks, it holds. And again, not a ton of power, but enough to get it out of its own way. Getting out onto the highway here, 110 kilometers an hour, turning about 3,300 RPM. Very short gearing. Although, as far as RPMs go, that's not too crazy. My Civic revs higher on the highway than that. Obviously on the highway here, tons of wind noise. It is a soft top, to be expected. It is quite loud in here. Speaking of gearing, that is one of the other things I love about this car, and just cars in general. Manual transmissions that have short gearing, even if they don't have a lot of power, those close ratios just make everything just way more fun to me. You get to row through the gears, you're shifting lots, you're using the higher RPMs, the revs build quickly, and you get to do all that without being too far over the speed limit or even under it. To me, that's where the fun is. I don't like getting speeding tickets. I'm sure no one does. And to be able to push a car through its rev range and still not get yourself into trouble. I know I keep repeating that, but that's just where the fun is to me. 70 miles an hour, almost 3,500 RPM, about 3,400 RPM. Not that the car can't drive on the highway, it's just that it's quite loud. On a quick weekend trip to the beach or the cabin, a few hours away, I think I could tolerate this just fine, but cross-country road trips, this would be a no-go for me. The pedals in here are set up quite nicely, pretty much perfectly for heel-toe downshifts. Brake and gas pedal are nice and close together. In terms of the shifter, the throws are relatively short. Shifter is nice and tight. Again, though, it is a little crunchy. Well, and again, we're going to switch out for that Motorcraft transmission fluid that everyone recommends for the NCs. But aside from that little bit of crunchiness, notchiness, no complaints on the shifter there for me. And again, pedals just perfect for heel towing. Steering, this is the last generation of Miata to have hydraulic power steering. So there is quite a bit of feel through here. I love the weighting of it. It's not necessarily the fastest rack in terms of ratio. I believe it's 15:1 on these cars. So it's not super twitchy feeling in terms of instant response off center. But I don't mind that at all. The wheelbase on this car is so short, probably don't want it to be too twitchy. Want it to be a little slower, a little more progressive. 15:1 is a nice balance where it doesn't feel too slow. 0 to 60 times in this car are around the high 6-second range. Obviously it's icy today. Plus, I don't like to abuse the clutches on my own cars, so we're not going to actually be trying to get that time today, but we'll go through the gears here. Obviously, if you know Miatas, you don't buy one to go racing people in straight lines. This is a car for you to kind of enjoy on your own, in the corners, in the turns. This is a handling car, not a dragster. I have a sports car that's meant to be not taken too seriously. You know, it flops over a ton, but it's fun. It's still fun to corner. It holds its speeds. It's a little goofy looking, especially these NC1s at the front end. Probably my least favorite looking Miata. But I own it for the driving experience. It's tiny, it's small, it's a convertible. You can't take yourself too seriously in this car. People are going to make fun of you that it's not that fast. But at the end of the day, you're the one having all the fun in the corners. You're the one having fun. It's a car that's fun to drive at all speeds. Doesn't need to be pushed super hard to feel that level of fun. You're the one who's laughing with a grin on your face just from driving this car. So the way I see it, people can make fun of you all they want that Miatas aren't fast. They're not supposed to be. And as long as you're okay with that, I think that's the thing. I think as long as you think you'll like Miatas, I think you will. There's a reason that Miatas are legendary. There's a reason why they're so popular in the enthusiast scene. And even though this is the biggest, heaviest, porkiest of the Miatas, in the modern context of how heavy cars are, of just how heavy cars have gotten lately, that really isn't lost here. Maybe when it first came out, it was a huge departure from the NA and the NB, which was really just kind of a more refined over time version of the NA itself. This would have been a big change back then, but relative to modern cars now, this is still crazy light. And I think as time passes, people are going to realize, you know, the NC really isn't that bad. It's actually still quite good. Especially with the steering feel here. I do like the styling of the NDs a lot better. And obviously the interior quality and interior amenities. But this hydraulic power steering, this is the most modern Miata you can get that hasn't switched over to the electric power steering, and it is just great. You get all the road feel. You can feel what the tires are doing. You can feel when the car's getting loose. It's easy to correct. That's still true of the ND, it's just you can feel that a little more through the steering wheel. Speaking of which, one of my complaints of this car is probably the steering wheel. I don't mind that it's a little bit wider and that it's round. My Golf R had the D-shaped steering wheel. Kind of over the D-shaped steering wheels nowadays. I do like just a normal round wheel. The one thing I do wish it had those little 10 and 2 notches or little thumb grips at 9 and 3, just to make your hands a little more comfortable. And it's a pretty basic, just circle, thin rim steering wheel. I just wish it gave you some places to put your hands that felt a little more ergonomic, a little more comfortable. In terms of comfort, I will say I wish the seats were a little more comfortable. No lumbar adjustment on these seats, and there's not really that much bolstering side to side either. So when you take those hard corners, you kind of slide around. Thinking about some other things here, I did really consider the new Toyota 86, the new GT86, the 2022s that just came out, second generation. On paper and all the reviews I've read, it sounds like they've fixed everything I didn't like about the first gen, and I might even like it more than a Miata. Problem was with the chip shortages and supply shortages and how low stock dealerships are, it just wasn't in the cards. The timing wasn't right. I would have had to wait several more months to be able to get one, and I felt like I wanted to get a car at that time already. And so I ended up settling for this. Haven't even test driven the new 86 yet, but if I may say, it's a pretty good package to settle for here. The original plan was to maybe keep this car for about 3 years and then move on. Even with cars I really like, I find that eventually I just want to try something different. That's what ended up happening with the Golf R. I'm sure will happen to this someday as well. But even having not had a lot of seat time in this car, I am enjoying it quite a bit. So things that might change with that plan. When we first got this car, I didn't know we were going to be adopting a dog so fast. And so now I don't have enough seats to take the dog and my girlfriend. So who knows, maybe that brand new GT86 might still be in the cards. But I would like to enjoy the convertible, having the roof down for at least one summer, and then make a decision from there. Who knows, if I like it too much, I might just have to keep the Miata and get some kind of beater sports car that has a back seat. But we'll see. We'll get through the summer. We'll see how it is. Really excited to get this car on the Continental Extreme Contacts, on the OEM rims in the summertime. Love to see how this car will handle in the summer with some proper summer tires. Obviously, I bought this car in December. As of filming, it is still the end of March. And we had tons and tons of snow this year. I think I saw a graph between December and February, I think it's either the second or the third most snow we've ever gotten in history. So it's gonna take a while for all this snow to melt. But yeah, I bought this car in December. It's still March. Haven't had a chance to drive it on some dry, warm pavement. One of the pros to this suspension setup, though it does lean in the corners quite a bit, is that I actually do like that it is a little bit of a softer sports car. You know, there's some, especially in the springtime, after all the snow has melted and the roads have gone through that freeze melt cycle, leaves the roads in pretty rough shape, bumps and potholes, and because of that, because of the softer suspension, this is a sports car that actually handles the bumps pretty well. It doesn't feel like it beats you up all the time. Just, you do have to deal with just the tininess of this car and the shortness of the wheelbase. Kind of bounces you around a bit. But it is nice that the setup is actually a little soft. Which maybe I'm getting old, but that just seems to be what I prefer these days. Road noise when you're at full freeway speeds is quite loud, is quite harsh. But when we're on these kind of more medium speed roads, even around town, I was worried that with the soft top, I'd start to get annoyed by all the road and wind noise. But I'm relieved to say that around town at least, around town and around these back roads, the wind noise really isn't that bad. It's totally livable. Yeah, otherwise guys, I think that's about it with this car. If we get another big snowfall again, we'll do another video of what it's like to drive in some deeper snow. Though winter may be done, we'll have to see. You never know in Canada. Otherwise, yeah, might practice with the GoPro some more, make some videos on the CX-5. We'll make some videos on the EM1 Civic once summer comes and we have that out of the garage. For now, just get a couple more accelerations in here. Bit of traction control. And again, those short gear ratios, making regular commuting fun. We almost went up through the RPMs, almost through about 3 different gears. And that's on a street where the speed limit's 80 kilometers an hour. So we got to have a lot of fun, and we didn't have to go that fast or break any rules. That's where the fun is with this car, or any car with short ratio gearbox. Combine that with how well this car handles in the corners, and you see why the Miata's been a recipe for success for a long time now. Try to get a quick U-turn here. Show you guys the turning radius. Obviously we can turn super tight. This is a small car after all. Otherwise, yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for sticking around and watching me play around with the GoPro. Subscribe if you're interested in more Miata content, more car content in general. We'll see what else we can get our hands on. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.